In this PowerPoint, we're going to look at working with numerical data types. So there are different ways of representing numerical data. When you're choosing a data type, think about the following questions. Do I need a whole number, or do I need something that will represent a fraction or a decimal? If you want to use a decimal, how precise do you need to be? And is performance a factor? So most times choosing a data type that takes up less memory is going to result in faster applications. Integer. An integer is a whole integer value like 4, 100, or 2,349. So it's a whole number. So it's a good way to count units or things. So to define a variable with the type integer, you write integer variable name equals 7, which is a value. When using a decimal value, we have a few options. We have float, double, and decimal. So double is usually the best choice of all the three because it's more precise than a float, but it's faster to process than a decimal. So use a decimal for financial applications since it's the most precise. So to define a variable with the type double, you write double, variable name, and then the value. So to define a variable with the type decimal, you write decimal as the data type, then the variable name equals, and then the value with an M. So don't forget the M character after the number right there, no spaces. This character tells C# that we're defining a decimal and not a double. So what can we do with numerical data? Well, the first step is to write expressions using arithmetic operators, right? So these are arithmetic operators. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. We have the addition, subtraction, multiplication, which is the asterisk, and then the division, which is the slash. So using operators, you perform operations on numbers so that you can create new values. You can add them or subtract them or times them or divide them. So make sure that you pay attention to data types. When using operators, this is very important. When we use two integers, it will return an integer every time. If we combine an integer with a double, the answer is going to be a double. Okay, so for example, if you write 5 divided by 3, you're going to have 1. It's going to be rounded off. But if you write 5 divided by 3.0, it's going to be 1.66667. Next, let's talk about the order of operations. C# follows the order of operations. So first, exponentiation and root extraction, then multiplication and division, and then finally you have addition and subtraction. And make sure that you use parentheses. So operator shortcuts. So sometimes we need to update a variable in our program. We can do so by modifying that variable by using an arithmetic expression and then resaving it to the same variable name. For example, if you have, let's say integer apple equals 0, then you can say apple equals apple plus 1 if you want to plus 1 to that original value. Then when you print this, sorry, it should be right line, apple, then it will print 1. Okay, so that new value of apple is apple, which is 0, used to be 0, plus 1 will be 1. We can condense the same program that we just wrote using the shorthand plus plus. So the combined addition sign represents the idea of incrementing by 1. So we can do this also with the subtraction symbol. So a shorter way to do the same thing basically. Okay, so just now we had integer apple equals 0, and then, then we added 1, apple equals apple plus 1, and then we print apple. So we can just go apple plus plus. Okay, so this will also print 1. So we just plus once. So this is just incrementing by 1. You can test this out in Visual Studio as well. Okay, so you can increment by another value as well. If you want the amount to increment by another value, like by 3 instead of just by 1, you can go integer apple equals 0, then apple plus equals 3. So this is the same as saying apple equals apple plus 3. And then when you write it out, right line, it prints 3. Again, if you want to decrement, which is decrease, you would just go minus equals 3. So let's take a look at modulo. Modulo returns a remainder from what's left over when we divide a number by another number. So if 4, and you use the percentage sign for it, 4, modulo 3, and then it goes in there once, then you'll have a remainder of 1, okay? Because 3 only goes into 4 once, and then you have a remainder of 1, so 1 is the remainder. If you have 4 divided by 2, right, then you have no remainder, so that would be 0. All right, so let's do our class activity. So let's say you're teaching a computer science in a classroom and you need to break up your students into teams. So you can start by creating a variable named student that has a value of 18. Okay, so this would be an integer. So you need to find a number that will go evenly into 18 without a remainder. Okay, so you don't want a remainder, so that there are an even number of students. So the group should have more than 2 students in each group, but no more than 5. Okay, so create a variable named group size and then enter a number between 3 and 5. And inside of a console right line statement, use the modulo operator to see if the students will divide evenly into group size. Okay, so if it doesn't, change the value of the group size until it does. So you don't have to use any loops or anything fancy here. You can just manually change the value of the group size until you find that the modulo is nothing. Okay. Okay, moving on. Let's do built-in methods. There's several built-in methods that we can use to manipulate the numerical data and perform even more complex mathematical calculations. So we have something like math abs, which will find the absolute value of a number. So math abs -1 is going to return 5. And we have math square root, which will find the square root of a number. So math.square root 16 returns 4. And math floor will round the given number or decimal to the nearest whole number. So we'll round it down to the nearest whole number. So if you have, for example, if you have 8.65, it will return 8. And math min returns the smaller of 2 values. So math min, if you have 2 values, 39 and 12, it's going to return 12, the smaller value. Okay, so we have looked at a few common built-in methods just now, but there are many, many more out there. Okay, so I'd like you to look up the following methods to understand their usage. Okay, so you can go to this link. This link is also given to you in Web Campus. Okay, so let's look at Math POW, Math Max, and Math Ceiling. And I would like you to explain them in your class activity.